Hi, my name is Jeremy. I am working here at the Ark today, the Ark Encounter, and I'm here with Tim. He is the content manager for the attractions, which include the Ark Encounter and also the Creation Museum. And we are here to give you a flood of answers today regarding Ark Signs. So what does that mean, Tim?
Well, Jeremy, a lot of people have come to the Ark Encounter, and they've tried to get pictures of all the different signs because they say there's too much for me to read while I'm here just in one day, or I've got kids that I'm bringing along, and how can I read everything when my kid wants to go play on something else, and I can't take the time to do everything. So they try to take pictures, but sometimes there's big crowds and they can't get a shot of it. So they said, do you have a book that has all of these signs in there? Well, up until the last week we didn't, but now we do. So this is the Ark Signs book that teach a flood of answers. There we go. So that is now available in our bookstore, and what we're going to do is walk you through some of the exhibits to show you what this book is like, so people can get a good feel for it. So right from the start, I'll say that it doesn't cover every single sign in the Ark, because then we'd have about a 250-page book.
Right.
So what we decided to do is take all of the main teaching exhibits rather than the themed ones. So like the living quarters, there's not a whole lot of sign. It's just mostly just what would their life have been like on the Ark, and some of that's just artistic license. A lot of it is we don't know for sure what it would have been like, and so we didn't include that. But the ones where we're teaching a lot of information, those are the ones that we focused on in this book.
Right. So if you're here coming to the Ark Encounter and you only can come for a few hours and you're not going to be able to read everything, or even if you do come and read everything, either way, you have this book available to you to be able to catch up on everything that you missed or remind you what you already read. So it's a great advantage here, and we'll be posting a link in the comments so you can go for the product page and learn more about it and also purchase it. So Tim, take it away.
All right, well, let me walk you through a few of these. We do have our animal kinds out here. We're on the second deck of the Ark. The reason we're starting here is because the Ark is just opening up, and we didn't want to be having the crowds go by and talking and asking questions while we're doing this. So we're going to try to stay ahead of the crowd today, but we'll see if they catch up to us by the time we're done. So we have animal kinds, and each of these, there's signs for each of the animals identifying what kind that is. So we have the giraffe kind and the horse kind, and we've got the rhinoceros kind over here. And you can see on the giraffe and the rhinoceros, we've got extra teaching signs that deal with questions that people have. For example, on our giraffe kind, why is the giraffe's neck so short? And if you read that, you can find out the answer. I can tell you it's because the giraffe and the okapi are part of the same kind, and there's other giraffids that we find in the fossil record. This one is built on Chancetherium, so they would have looked more like this as far as their build. We don't know exactly what the coat pattern would have been like, so that's why we made these the way we did. And even with the rhinoceros kind, we have a question about whether or not Noah brought unicorns on the Ark, which is a popular one for skeptics, but because of the way the King James Bible and some others use the word unicorn, and people think white horse with a horn on its head. But if you replace that word with rhinoceros, it fits perfectly every single time, and actually that is what rhinos were called at one time, unicorns. So it makes good sense. So we have those signs in the book, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here you can see the rhinoceros kind sign that we have in the Ark. And here we have the word unicorns on the Ark. So all of that information is available in this book. Now when we move into the animal kinds exhibit, some of the signs don't look, they're not made to fit into a book. I mean, they were made to fit on a wall like this, and so the designers didn't design the signs and say, hey, someday can we put this on a page that's 8.5 by 11? So the publisher had to be a little bit creative in how they put this sign together, and I'll show you what that looks like. To make sure that you get all the information and we're not just cutting some of it out. So you can see here that the image is still there, but some of the wording where you might find it way over on the right side, it's not going to fit in there. So the one with the big number 34,000, you can see that down here, and so the text gets moved around and enlarged a little bit in some places so you can see it. This sign over here doesn't appear on this page, but it is on the very next page. So you still get the same information there. And then when we move into the next exhibit, or the next bay of the exhibit, you have the same sort of thing. So since these pages don't always lay out, or the signs don't always lay out exactly as they should on a page, they get rearranged a little bit, so you still get all the information, you still get the artwork that people like to see, and you can learn what it is that we're trying to teach in these exhibits. So here's this one.
All of these various disciplines falling into place on the way from all of the various team members.
So now when you come to the Animal Kinds exhibit, if there's a big crowd in this room watching the video behind us on how did our team make these amazing sculptures that they did, which oftentimes people are stopped watching this because it's so unique how the guys did what they did, and it's really incredible to watch. And it's about a 7-minute video, so people will be parked here watching this, and sometimes it gets backed up and you got to go around and you might actually miss this part. Well, now you can get it in the Ark Signs book and you can see what it was all about. So, and Jeremy's back with us.
Hey, so I just pinned the link to the book. It's on the Answers in Genesis website. The Answers in Genesis is the owner and creator of the Ark Encounter. So you'll find it on the Answers in Genesis online website, but also it is available in the bookstore as well. We got that copy from the bookstore underneath the Ark. So if you come here in October or whenever we got a question about that, you will be able to acquire this book. So.
Unless it's sold out.
Unless it's sold out and so popular, which I tell you what, one of the things that people do say is they weren't able to read everything or whatever. So this is going to be a popular book. I can think that that's what's going to be. So anyway, let's move through the rest of the Ark. We'll give you some examples of the other signs that you'll see.
So we dug into
And we even have these ones as well. So all of the different animals, not only out in the cages, but also the ones that are on display in this exhibit. So you've got the ape kind, the pongid, you've got Archaeopteryx on the other side, you've got the dog and the cat kinds. So all of those are included in the book as well, so you get that information.
Right. And these are, if you came here in the opening and you haven't been since, these are actually some new exhibits that were installed since the opening.
So many that we're continuing to add all the time.
Right.
Especially outside lately. There's a lot of things going on outside.
Right. There's a lot outside that they have installed. Just continually updating the Ark, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Then one of the exhibits that people really enjoy, and this is inevitably when I ask people what was your favorite exhibit, and I do that all the time when I'm on the bus on the way back afterwards, almost without fail, men will say this exhibit, the animal care.
Right.
And the reason is, and it's kind of goofy, because we talk about how do they get fresh water, how do they get fresh air, how do they get lighting in the Ark, and really the main one that they want, how do they get rid of all the animal waste? For some reason, that's what the guys are like, oh, that's so neat, I wondered about that. And so that exhibit is also in here. As you move through, we've got this section over here about the ventilation and about the lighting. And so all of the information that you see in these videos and in the signage along the videos, that's in this book as well.
And it includes a lot of diagrams as well. So it's not just reading the signs, but it has pictures in there of the examples too.
Right, and as I mentioned before in the last exhibit, you can see how they had to change the layout a little bit to fit this, but you still get the same information. So you get clean water, liquid waste removal, solid waste removal, there it is. So you've got all that information in this book, and you get the artwork like you were talking about, so people can follow along with what it is that they're looking at.
And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. I will be looking at my phone from time to time so we can read the questions and answer them.
So that's your excuse why you look like you're not paying attention to me sometimes?
Possibly.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes people are like, hey, how come that guy, get a different interviewer? He's just looking at his phone. Well, it's because he's trying to see if you guys have good questions to ask.
So many things going on.
Right. And it's because he got people in his ears saying, hey, Jeremy, go. No, we don't have that. So let's take a look at another popular exhibit. And this is going to be the Fairy Tale Ark exhibit. Is one that a lot of people say is their favorite.
I hear there's a lot of great books in there, the Fairy Tale Ark exhibit.
Well, that's a debatable definition of great. Let's say that. And I think what happens sometimes, people see, we intentionally designed the exhibit to be very cute. But if you're in there for any length of time, you'll realize something's not right about it. Because it starts off with like this happy music, and you can hear children laughing, and then all of a sudden everything changes and it's a more somber mood. And the reason is that a lot of times people get this idea that the flood was, because of these books, these children's books, they get the idea that the flood was just about a happy old guy named Noah and a bunch of cute little animals.
Right.
And we've talked as a ministry about how dangerous of a position that can be, that you're not. That's not what the Bible talks about. The Bible says the world was extremely wicked, and that God judged the world with a flood. So the flood account is really about God's judgment and His mercy toward Noah and his family, and also the representatives of the animals. So you can hear the laughing if you can pick that up on the video. But after a little bit, things really change. And so people look at this and they're like, oh, where can I get these books? Well, we don't want you to get these books. So people they have a misconception about what this exhibit's about. They just think, oh, it's cute, let me get a picture in here. But if you look at what's talked about, we've got the 7 Ds of deception. We talk about how even though people have good intentions a lot of times when they're building these things, or when they're writing these, or when they're drawing them, it's giving people the wrong idea about what the Scripture teaches. So it kind of gives the impression that, the Noah's Ark is just a fairy tale. And so we designed this exhibit to help people see what it's really about. So we've got this poem on the back wall, and there's the poem in here, and it's kind of a fun little rhyme that is what would happen if the Ark was really shaped like this, if it was really a bathtub Ark. Well, at the very end it says, the Ark was demolished from floorboard to rafter, and no man or beast lived happily ever after.
Right.
So there would be no more people, there would be no more land animals, because this would sink, when the first wave came. So we've got the signage that you see on the wall, the signage here, the 7 Ds of deception. You can find that here. So all of that is in this book. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned at the beginning, we don't have every single exhibit in this book because the book would just be too long. But the main teaching exhibits, those are the ones that are included in here.
So if you're just joining us, we are here at the Ark Encounter today. We're inside the Ark on the 2nd level, and we are talking about this Ark Signs book that we have. And again, as Tim just said, it includes many of the signs, all the teaching exhibit signs in the Ark. So if you're coming to the Ark and you are reading the signs and you want to remember what you read, or you maybe missed some signs, this has a lot of the signs in there. So it's very valuable for those who are wanting to learn more, or just to kind of remember what they learned. So it's a very valuable resource.
Great. Should we move on to the door?
Yes.
Because we have that one as well.
Cool. The door here at the Ark, as we all know, or many of us know, there's one door to the Ark. And we have the door here, and this is one of the most popular exhibits. People loved getting their picture taken in front of the door. And we have some teaching surrounding the door as well. So we'll see that here in just a few seconds. And as we're moving up here on the right, as you may or may not be able to see, during the middle of the day, they have an area for kids and adults to have animals inside the Ark, so you can encounter animals inside the Ark and just have a cool little opportunity there. So that's right over there. So they have all sorts of animals that you can encounter and possibly pet, and they'll just kind of teach you all about the different animals and just the animals of the kinds that may have been on the Ark. So it's just kind of meant to represent some of the different kinds of animals that are on the Ark and kind of have an opportunity to meet with them there. But anyway, here is the door to the Ark. Tim, can you explain to us just the signs and kind of just the teaching behind the door here at the Ark?
Yeah, as you mentioned while we were walking up to it, there's one door into the Ark, and we use that as a parallel, as a reminder that just as there's one door into the Ark that Noah and his family entered to be saved from the flood, from the physical destruction of the flood, there's also one way that we can be saved from our sin, from eternal punishment, and that is through Jesus Christ. He is our door of salvation, if you will. And so we use that as a parallel. And to set that story up, we also have the exhibit with Japheth's wife over there, where she's pondering some difficult questions that people have. Why is there death and suffering? How could God allow things to become so bad? And was it just for God to judge the entire earth? Is that fair that He does that? When surely there were some good people, right? Well, we know the Bible tells us that we're all sinners, and we know that we all are. So is God cruel? And so we just scratched the surface of some of these difficult questions, but they are included in the book as well. And so here's Japheth's wife struggling with those questions, which makes sense if you think about it from, if you were one of the 8 people on the Ark, and everybody you had ever known except for those people on the Ark were now gone, would you wrestle with that, or would you just say, oh, too bad for them? I think you'd struggle with the fact that your family members or some other people your friends and neighbors are gone. So That's what we wanted her to wrestle with those, because we know people have, it's really, they're fair questions to ask, and
Right.
we need to be prepared to give answers to them. So that's what we're just touching in this area. Obviously, entire books have been written to cover that topic,
Sure.
so we can't do it justice in one little thing, but it at least gives people the
Right.
right perspective.
And we do have other books available on the Answers in Genesis website if you go there, if you want to dig deeper. But this book, it gives a great overview of, the time of the flood and, just the big picture perspective on what it all means to us.
Yep. So let's move up to the third floor, because that's where the majority of our teaching exhibits are. After you get through the living quarters, the whole front side of the Ark is really our scientific exhibits that take you from about geology, ice age, ancient man, Babel, and so we cover a lot of those topics. They're all included in this book. That's where a lot of the if I can say, the deeper content is included in the Ark.
So we're going to deck 3 right now. And for those that are just joining us, I'll reiterate again that we are exploring the Ark signs, the teaching signs that are at the Ark. And we are showing how many of these signs are now in a book called Ark Signs that teach a flood of answers. I have pinned a comment there for those who are interested in buying the book online. And for those that are coming, you can get the book in the bookstore or the store underneath the Ark. There's many different things that you can get there. And this book will also be available there as well. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comments, and we'll try to answer those here today. As you notice, we are going up ramps, so inside the Ark we are handicap accessible, so anywhere that you can go via ramps.
And the wheelchairs and the ECV, the powered carts, are available for rental, first come, first served basis.
Right, that's correct. If you want to know anything more about tickets or anything about the Ark Encounter itself, please visit arkencounter.com. All right, where are we going now, Tim?
Well, let's stop in front of the Why the Bible's True exhibit. This what we call Searching for Truth, which is the graphic novel, and I think we've done a Facebook Live down here to walk through this one and talk about it. But it's really my favorite exhibit. But and the reason it's my favorite one because of the topic. I mean, not only do we get to defend the truth of Scripture, but most importantly, by the end, we're sharing the gospel in a unique way. And so people might be wondering if that's in the Ark Signs book, and the answer to that question is no, it's not. But if I can get that one, it is in this book. This is called Searching for Truth, and this is really just like a graphic novel. Jeremy, if you can hold this. It's just walking you right through each of the scenes as we have our three main characters walking around their college campus, or we see them going about their daily life on campus, and we have our Christian, whose name is Andre. He's defending his faith, and then we have Gabriella and Rio, who have questions for them, and we see those questions that are very common that people are asking in our day. And so that's included in this book called Searching for Truth, which is also available in our bookstore, online, and also at the Ark Gift Shop and the Creation Museum bookstore. So you won't find that in Ark Signs because of that reason, and because you can see the thickness of this, it would double it, and suddenly you're talking about a much more expensive book.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why we didn't include every exhibit in this one, because when they initially started laying it out, it was about 230 pages, and
Sure.
that didn't even include this, and there were a couple other ones they didn't include yet.
Right.
So we had to make a decision: do we do every single exhibit, or just some of them? And we narrowed it down to the teaching exhibits as opposed to the themed exhibits.
Right.
If guests can understand the difference between those. So the themed ones are where you're just kind of walking into an environment and seeing what it might have been like. So the workshop, the Noah's study, Noah's library, the living quarters. Those ones are not in this book, but the ones where we're trying to teach you a fair amount of content, those ones are included.
Right.
So we'll move down all the way down the hall here, and we'll move to the flood geology room, which turned out to be one of my favorite exhibits. And the reason for that is if people ask me questions like, what are your what are the areas you know least about in terms of the creation, evolution, and all of these different issues, I would say astronomy and geology. And so when I had to write the flood geology exhibit, I asked Dr. Andrew Snelling, PhD geologist, I said, do you want to write this? And he said, no, you need to, because you need to write it in such a way that you can understand it, and if you can understand it, then other people can understand it.
Right.
And he didn't mean that to be a slam on me, like, Tim, you're dumb, you can't. But if somebody who isn't an expert in geology can get it, then like me, somebody who's not an expert, then you can get other people to understand it. And so I'm very pleased with how it turned out, because I get it. It makes sense to me.
That makes sense.
So I'm very glad Dr. Snelling didn't write it, because then all the words would have been too big and I wouldn't understand it, even if other people could.
Sure.
But we do have the signs for that. In fact, I think that is the exhibit that takes up the most space in this book. There are so many different signs. There's a lot of information on the signs, and so it's one that I think a lot of people wish they could spend more time in.
Right.
So that one takes up a fair amount of space in the Ark Signs book.
And while we're making our way there, if you're interested on some of the best times to come in the Ark, right now is one of the best times to come inside the Ark, because people are just beginning to come inside the Ark. They're making their way here, and you can kind of see everything with probably some of the least amount of people, and then also late afternoon as well. So mid-morning, that's probably one of the busiest times. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing the live stream now, so we can see all the signs and be able to view them well without navigating between crowds of people.
Right, exactly. A lot of times I've heard people say, well, I've told my friends to get there right at opening, and I say, you know what, get there before opening so you're one of the first ones in line. If you get there 10 minutes late or half an hour late, you're going to be standing in line for a while on our busy days. Thankfully, from a crowd standpoint, right now is a good time to come because kids are back in school for the most part,
Yep.
and so the attendance is not as busy as it has been over the summer months, and we're getting 4,000 to 5,000 every single day. We're still getting that on weekends, on Saturdays, but some Saturdays in the summer we had over 8,000 people, which is a lot. You don't want to come at 10 o'clock on that day because you'll be standing in a lot of lines. But it's still neat to see how God's blessing it and how many people are coming.
For sure.
So here's one of the things we did in the more science exhibits. We wanted to help people understand that creationists, evolutionists, we have the same world. We have the same rock, same fossils, the same planet. We study the same things, but we have a different interpretation based on our worldview.
Right.
And so we've set this little thing up that you'll see throughout several of these exhibits called One World, Two Views. And here's this sign in the book. And this explains why we reached the conclusion that we do. We believe there's a worldwide flood that would have laid down the vast majority of those rock layers that we see and all those fossils. And that's why when we look at the fossil record, we interpret it in terms of a worldwide flood. Whereas the evolutionary view says, no, this is the result of long, gradual changes over billions of years. And yet when we look at the data, when we go out there and we look at the world, we see that doesn't make sense of what we find. The one that does make sense is that they were buried in a worldwide flood. So we talk about some of the problems with the evolutionary view, and then, so what we've done is we laid it out. Here's the evolutionary view. Here's what we actually see, and this is, you've seen this fossil record book or the geologic column in your textbooks, and it uses the terms like Cretaceous and Jurassic, but those are just labels for the rock layers. They're not an age, even though people often associate millions of years with them. It really is just the name for the rock layer. And then over here is our view, and that the reason you find the fossils buried in the levels that they are is because it represents a progression of burial. Obviously, sea creatures are going to get buried first, then those that live by the sea, and then as you get further and further inland, that's the order that things are going to be buried in, and that's what we find.
Right.
So we also have in this exhibit this area that really is which, if you look at the sign over there, it asks the question, which planet suffered a major catastrophic flood? And if you ask the majority of evolutionary scientists, they'll say Mars, but not Earth. It looks funny because as far as we know, we have no liquid water on the surface of Mars, but Earth is 70% covered with water. But the reason they said it is because if you look on this sign, you've got evidence for flooding on Mars. You've got what looks like evidence for flooding. You've got these channels, and you've got gravel from a stream bed. You've got dry riverbeds, and all these things that look like they were carved by water So it makes sense that there could have been liquid water on the surface of Mars that caused all of that. But what they don't admit is that all of those things that they use as evidence for major catastrophic flooding we see on Earth in great abundance on a planet that has so much water. And they'll say, well, you can never have a worldwide flood on Earth. Well, really, it's just showing their bias. So we have that explained, and that's in the book as well. The same. I'm not going to teach everything in this exhibit. You'll have to get the book or come to the Ark to find out what else is in here. But this spectacular artwork that you can see here, that's also included in the book. And this is kind of the, what happened outside the Ark during the flood. Why did we go from one continent, one landmass, to the 7 that we have today, and how the flood would have caused that, how it would have caused the mountains to be built. So what we call catastrophic plate tectonics.
Right. So while things in this book aren't necessarily geared towards young people such as children, toddlers, what I would say is some of the pictures in here are. You can just skim through the book, just kind of teach your children kind of what the signs are saying. And so, whether you want to get this book for yourselves or to kind of show your children or whatever, we encourage it for all ages. So,
and I would say the other thing about it, because you have it there in front of you, you have the time to study it, and because, as I was mentioning with this exhibit particularly, I had to break it down in a way that I could understand, which is really like maybe a high school level of understanding of geology. Sure. So it is something that you could teach your kids. You could study it for a little bit and figure out how can I help them understand this.
Right.
So we've got some signs that are particularly relevant. This one right now, if some of our people who read on our website might have heard that a couple months ago Dr. Andrew Snelling filed a lawsuit against, I think it was the National Park Service, because they would not allow him to take samples from some of these areas where we see this warped rock. And what he wants to do is test that to show that they were not, they weren't bent, or the composition of the rock did not change. It didn't become so heated up that it bent under the pressure. Instead, it was still soft when it was bent. And so what he hopes to show, and I think he'll be able to, is that all of these layers were laid down at about the same time. They were still soft when this upwarp occurred that caused this bending. And that's why you don't see all the cracking and breaking in between those layers. If they were already hard when they bent, you would see a bunch of breaking and fracturing. So he's going to show, or his study, his research is to show that these were all laid down. It was going to be consistent with the flood, not with the evolutionary view of long ages, which is, I think, the reason nobody wanted him to be able to get samples and why they blocked him from getting samples for a while. But he did get the samples. He just took a trip to the Grand Canyon and he got all the samples, so now we wait findings. And really, that's what you're supposed to do with science, right?
Right.
So that's what he's doing. So that's the Ark Signs book, and you can find that sign and the other ones in this exhibit in this book. We've got the next exhibit, the Ice Age exhibit. That's in here as well. So there's the Ice Age, and then we've got the Tower of Babel exhibit, and we've got one more, and we've got Ancient Man. That's still Babel. That's a long one too. So there's the Ancient Man exhibit. So all of the signs that you see in the Ancient Man exhibit are included in this book. And then we end it with two other ones. We've got the Flood Legends. Now, obviously, we can't put the video in here that you get to watch, kind of a whimsical video about what would happen to the various arks, if you will, from the different legends if you put them out in the flood. And we see that all of them, except for the biblical ark, would not survive. The passages would not survive in all of them. And then we also have the Rainbow Covenant exhibit. So a lot of times people look at the spectacular artwork that Oscar did, and they stare at that and they kind of miss the signs around it because the artwork's so amazing. So this book will give you an opportunity to look at both.
Right. So this is the Ark Signs book. It was just released, and it is including many of the teaching signs that are inside the Ark. So if you're planning on coming to the Ark and you want to get ahead on the game, then get this book. You can also get it while you're here in the store underneath the Ark, and then also you can buy it online. We pinned the link in the comments to go to the Answers in Genesis store, where you can get this book, and then you can look at a number of other books, including the Searching for Truth book. That also covers one exhibit here with many of the different artwork and the teaching in there too.
One thing we should have brought along with us, and we forgot to, is the Journey Through the Ark Encounter, which is a new book that came out just over a month ago, and it's a full color, lots of spectacular photographs of all the different exhibits. They didn't focus on the signs, but it focused on the exhibits and what they look like. And so really if you take the Ark Signs book and the journey through the Ark Encounter and you kind of put those together, it is like taking a tour through the Ark. You get to see all of, the beauty of the exhibits, and then you get to see, I'm going to say it, the beauty of the writing, because I did the writing. So, but actually the graphic designers are the ones that made my writing look good, so I'll give them a shout out for that. So yeah, that's what this is. I'd recommend all three of those books for that purpose. If you want to know what it is in the Ark that we're teaching, and you want to remember what it looked like, and have something to show your friends. Really, the Journey Through the Ark Encounter is a gorgeous book. It's one of those coffee table style books, and you can show people everything that you got to see while you're at the Ark.
Now we have a question. I was also looking at the comments here. Someone was interested in when the actual Tower of Babel, the big tower is going to open. Now that's like a number of years in the future. Is that correct? We still have other things.
I thought it was a couple thousand years ago. It didn't end well, or several thousand years
yeah,
ago.
Maybe you're right.
I read that back in Genesis 11. No, it is something that we're planning on building eventually, but our next phase here is to build the walled city.
Right.
So that's the next project here at the Ark. We're going to have a big multi-purpose auditorium so we can host conferences. Sure. We're expanding the zoo right now, kind of doubling it in size.
Right.
We just finished up the East and West Village. Oh, the West Village, I think, is finished. The East, I think they're still putting some finishing touches on.
Although it is open to view.
Yeah, it is open, yep. And then, so then the walled city would be next. That'll take a couple of years to do everything that we're planning on doing there. Babel, I believe, is the next, after that. I think that's the next phase. It might be 2 phases after that. So it's still several years down the road.
Right. So, yeah, keep on coming back because we have new things all the time, as Tim mentioned, and, we'll have those things open down the road. So, if there's no other comments, we will finish up here today. And don't forget to check out this book online, and look forward to seeing you at the Ark.